Good evening, everyone. Warm welcome to the keynote on protecting coastal communities' risk from changing climate. This is organized by the Future at South Asia Global Hub and the VHS Center for Climate Change based at Indian Institute of Science. And I'm the session host, Jency Maria. I'm a science officer at Future at Global Hub. Today, we have two dynamic personalities who co-founded their own NGOs in Sri Lanka and India. So our first speaker, Mr. Thushan Kapurusinghe, is a project leader and co-founder of Turtle Conservation Project. And next we have Dr. Naveen Namboothri, who is the founder, trustee and program head at Dakshin Foundation, India. It's a pleasure to have you both on board the panel. And once again, thank you for joining us and welcome to the session. Before starting with our first talk, let me take this opportunity to introduce the first speaker. I'll share my. Yes. So our first speaker, Mr. Thushan Kapurusinghe, is that project leader and co-founder of Turtle Conservation Project Sri Lanka. He's a marine turtle specialist who is a member of the IUCN and SSC Marine Turtle Specialist Group. He has extensive working experience in marine and coastal resource management with community participation in IUCN and SSC Marine Turtle Specialist Group. He has extensive working experience in marine and coastal resource management with community participation in Sri Lanka. He also worked as the coordinator of the Tsunami Recovery Program, which was implemented by the UNDP GEF SGP Sri Lanka between 2005 and further, he worked as the Program Development Officer for the Disaster Management Unit of UNDP Sri Lanka in 2010. Mr. Kapurusinghe has extensive experience in turtle conservation, mangrove restoration, sand dune restoration, exotic fish breeding, nature tourism, etc., with community participation. His main interests are community-based ecosystem conservation, diversification of community livelihoods, protected area co-management strategies, and sustainability of community-based projects. So I welcome Mr. Thushan to share his insights and experience with the coastal communities of Sri Lanka. The floor is yours, Mr. Thushan.
Thanks, Jency. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to use a PowerPoint presentation to share my experience with you all. And so the title allocated for me is Protecting Coastal Communities Risks from Changing Climate. And so I have been running this organization since 1993, and especially we are working along the coastal belt of Sri Lanka to protect sea turtles, and also we are working on other marine and coastal resources like coral reefs, mangroves, seagrass, and also we conduct a lot of education and awareness programs. So let's brief the topic of this today's presentation. So we all know that a healthy coastal our fisheries industry, tourism industry, and also it will support our mental well-being of human, and also our food security and public safety. But unfortunately, many of our coastal ecosystems are currently being transformed, or they have been degraded or lost due to anthropogenic reasons or caused by people. And climate has been impacted for these negative results. So explain you how these coastal habitats are linked with coastal communities, and how these two are coexisting, and what is the integration between coastal communities and coastal habitats. And so there are a wide range of habitats you can see within a coastal ecosystem. And you can see coral reefs, mangroves, seagrass beds, and also we have lagoon ecosystems, and also we have coral reefs, seagrass, and so many other marine and coastal resources where our coastal populations or communities are heavily dependent on. So especially coastal communities fulfill their protein requirements from coastal fishing. And also tourism plays a vital role in their economic gain in coastal areas. And also agriculture in coastal areas, because these places are highly populated. So there are a lot of lands allocated for agriculture as well. And also people use beaches, and they do diving, snorkeling, sunbathing, all these things as to keep them happy, and the mental well-being will be improved when they use coastal habitats. So these are some of the coastal habitats, and how they use the coastal resources. And then we should know what are the negative impacts of climate change on these coastal habitats. And we all know that I'm not going to elaborate or explain you what are the causes for climate change, or global warming. And as a result of global warming or climate change, we all know that sea level rises, with alarming rate. And also because of that, and we have coastal erosion due to climate change impacts, and also we have floods going on, especially during the high tide season, and also storm surge occurs in many places. And also, as a result of climate, now it is frequent that we have coral bleaching events, especially with El Nino effects. We had this in 1998 and again in several. So this is now more often. And also tsunamis, it also can be triggered by these climate change issues. And also, we know our coastal communities suffer from the reduction of their daily catch, and so reduced fish catch is also a negative result of climate change. And also coastal communities are struggling to obtain fresh water for their drinking purposes, and again because of the seawater intrusion, people are lacking fresh water. So in numerous ways, communities are facing with great difficulties because of climate change issues. And so I will explain you one. And so especially in Sri Lanka, we have a lot of agricultural lands located along the coastal belt in different coastal districts. However, in many places, we have a severe problem of seawater intrusion. And because of this high salinity in the soil, now a lot of farmers cannot cultivate their traditional crops like paddy field. And because of that, now we have problems, issues with food security, and especially when we are struggling with our financial situation at this moment. And also, as coastal communities lose their properties like their homes and their businesses, their hotels located in close vicinity to the beach, because of the sea erosion, their properties get lost. And also livelihoods of people are interrupted and disturbed because of climate change issues. And particularly as we speak, several places in Galle district of Sri Lanka are covered with rubble and also sand because of the rough seas. So during this particular month, we have monsoons and high tides and rough waves, which will disturb the travel and transportation of the general public or coastal communities. And also it will disturb because of the sea level rise, it will negatively affect on boat anchoring sites or harbors. So people will not have a safe place to anchor their boats. And also there are certain issues with public safety because of the sudden flood. And also, as I told you earlier, because of seawater intrusion, people are facing a lot of problems with finding suitable drinking water, fresh water. So now we have a lot of problems, especially in dry zone, where the government has to provide bowsers with water and distribute them among the coastal communities. And also, when sea level rise, nesting grounds for sea turtles will disappear. So then it will badly affect, and sea level rise make our beautiful beaches disappear. So then it will negatively affect the tourism in this country, especially the coastal tourism. So again, it will negatively affect the economy of coastal communities. And also, I told you that the high level of protein requirement is fulfilled by coastal fishing, and every year we are getting reduced catch levels among the fishing communities, and because of that we are facing problems with food security. Those people who are directly benefiting from direct harvest or exploiting natural marine and coastal resources, like those who collect turtle eggs and sell them to turtle hatcheries for personal consumption. And there are communities who depend on mining shells, bivalves, arthropods, and for their daily consumption. And so they will be badly affected from these sea level rise. And also, actually, I'm not going to go through one by one, but there are, a lot of identified health issues, global climate change or global warming. As you can read here, I have listed them. And so there are a lot of negative impacts on mental well-being of humans. And so we can list them for several numbers. And I will quickly go through my slides. And then the climate change is, it will happen anyway, that you can't expect the climate will remain as constant. So it will change with the time. So what you can do is that you can reduce the alarming rate. You can reduce the rate of change, and that's all you can see. You can do. So what you have to do is that you have to take necessary to reduce the global warming and the climate change. And also you have to, rather than stopping, what you should try to do is that you should adapt. And also you should mitigate, and also you should develop the resilience within your coastal communities to face the created by climate change effects. So we have to make sure that we have to create more awareness among the coastal communities about the future effects of climate change, and then how we can cope with, how we can deal with these problems. And also we have to conduct further research, surveys, and investigations to fully understand and fairly understand about the current rate and the what will happen in future, and how we are going to prepare, and what are the strategic plans to face these climate change issues. And so we have to think about options. What can be introduced? What can our local communities can do to mitigate or to face the climate change effects? And so I will briefly, since I have only 20 minutes, I will briefly explain you what are the different types of livelihoods we have introduced to coastal communities we are working with special reference to turtle conservation. But anyway, so we have been working with Rakava egg poachers, those coastal, or we call them beach boys, who used to kill turtles and eat their meat, and also collect turtle eggs and boil them on the beach and drink them, or sell them for turtle hatcheries like that. And then we trained research assistants or turtle nest protectors, and we taught them about research activities. And so they have been, and also we trained them as a tourist guide. And here you can see some of the research activities we have been carried out since 1993. And also we created more awareness. We developed the capacities of local people. It is not only about sea turtles, but about, facing the challenges and how develop your skills to face the problems. And also in addition, actually we involved all, men, women, different sectors of the society, and we introduced them different livelihoods. Take home message for you is that do not depend on a single livelihood option. So you have to find how you can diversify different livelihoods. So here you can see we introduced productions within the coastal communities, and here you can see some of the pictures, and also tailoring or sewing programs, developing markets for their products. And this is how we are exporting our products to UK markets. And here you can see how we use the sea turtles as a charismatic, like flagship species to attract our saleable items, community products. And especially during the pandemic crisis, we use it as an opportunity to improve the qualities or capabilities or skills of our coastal communities to restart their tourism once the pandemic. And some of the slides. And in addition, we diversified our community alternative livelihood options by introducing beauty culture workshops and also introducing cultivation, sea bass culture. Also, we distributed legal fishing nets to replace illegal fishing nets like monofilament nets. And also, we introduced ornamental fish breeding projects within our coastal communities. And here you can see some more slides. And also, we have salt packeting projects going on, and beekeeping projects, and revolving schemes have been introduced in several locations. And to ensure the food security, we have introduced organic farming, and we have distributed fruits and vegetable crops among the coastal communities. And people are earning money by maintaining nurseries for turtle conservation project. They have mangrove nurseries, they have other pandanus and other beach vegetation. And also we are using local people as trainers to perform arts in different locations. And also we provide computer training classes. And this is the library we used to have in Rakau village. And we provide herbal drink, and local people involved providing and finding these herbal leaves for kids. And also tourism can play a vital role as an alternative livelihood for coastal communities. And here you can see we are not entirely dependent on the turtle watch tourism, but also we take them to see the seagrass beds and also snorkeling to show them the traditional fishing activities. And also homestay units are used to replace a multi-story building, a hotel with built in an ecologically sensitive area. So actually we promote these homestay units in several coastal locations. And also coir mats, using coconut fibers. So we are, again, you can see we produce them using sea turtles as a species. And so this is our 29th year in operation. So basically we started with beach boys or egg poachers who were selling turtle eggs and killing turtles on the beach. And then we, with the time, we developed their capacities and we trained them as tourist guide. And now they are, and then we formed them a local group called Nature Friends of Rakau or NFR. And then we hand the Rakau project to the community to run the project by themselves. So actually still we are advising them, we are supporting them, and actually we are staying behind them. And when they need our support, then we will give them our fullest support to back them, because currently we are facing a financial crisis. So I thank Gen Z for inviting me for this event, and I hope that you got some idea about the climate change impacts on coastal communities and how we can cope with these issues. And also, I will take this opportunity to thank my staff of Turtle Conservation Project, Mitma, Kavindu, Himali, Shama, Amami, Utpala, Nishan, and all these staff members who made a wonderful job in arranging this, my IT facilities and all, solving technical problems. So, so thank you very much for everyone. And if you have any questions with the available time, I'm very happy to, elaborate on anything that I have mentioned during my presentation. So thank you very much. I hope I finish with.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Thushan, for that informative and thoughtful talk, especially on explaining different livelihood options that the TCP have implemented in Sri Lanka. If anyone have any questions to Mr. Thushan, please raise your hand or add in chat. So I think we don't have any for now. So let's move to the next talk of. So now we have Dr. Naveen Namboothri, who is a founder trustee of Dakshin Foundation and heads the Sustainable Fisheries Program at Dakshin. based in Bangalore, India. Trained as a marine biologist, he has worked in diverse coastal, marine, and island systems across India. He oversees the establishment and implementation of several marine conservation projects at Dakshin's field sites, such as the community-led fisheries management in the Lakshadweep, citizen science programs in the Andamans, and the long-term monitoring of coral reef ecosystems. Dr. Naveen also helps build Dakshin's environmental education program and oversaw the production of the publication Treasured Islands. He has more than 30 publications, including peer-reviewed journal articles, books, book chapters, and reports. He has served on the editorial board of Current Science and was an invited member of the Aquaculture and Marine Biotechnology Task Force of the Department of Biotechnology, Government of India. Welcome, Mr. Dr. Naveen, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jency. Thushan, for setting the context very beautifully. It's made my job. So yeah, I do have a presentation. It's a brief presentation. I'll try and keep it broader because it's very difficult to squeeze in a lot of content into a short window of 20 minutes. So I'll try and keep it very broad and short, but we'll delve into certain issues that were not Thushan in his talk, something that's distinct for India as well. And yeah, and happy to take questions from there. I am from the organization, this organization called Dakshin Foundation. As Jency mentioned, we are an organization that works primarily on coastal and marine systems. We've been working on these issues for the last 15 years as Dakshin, but individually, some of us have been working on coastal and marine systems since the last 20, 25 years as well. So yeah, I think it would be good to begin with a general overview. When we say coastal and marine systems, what does that mean? It's not just the ecological components of it, but we also do need to see coastal and marine systems very distinctly and differently, since the focus is on communities. We do need to understand that we have about 4.5 million fisher folk, who are basically practicing fisher folk in India. That's a significant number of fisher folk. We have about 16 million odd people who depend on fisheries and allied industries for a livelihood, marine fisheries and allied livelihood. It is also important to understand that the coastal space that comes to mind when we think about coastal and marine systems, highly contested spaces. So these are not spaces that are just where a lot of fishing related activities happen, but as you would all have noticed, it's also a place where that thin sliver of line that we call the coastline that runs along the entire coastline of India, which is about 700 odd kilometers that we have. There are multiple interest groups working in this small space, and this could be from a varied set of maritime activities. It could be ports. The port-based economy is currently still continues to be one of the major drivers of the global economy as well. Most of the trade globally happens, and in India's case, exports and imports, and all of that happens primarily through maritime links, right? So we do have a significant number of ports existing along the Indian. A lot of the industrial development is also centered around the coastal areas because it's a lot more easier to establish your industrial facilities along the coast because it reduces your costs in terms of managing your waste and effluents and all of that. This is also a space that is, increasingly seen as great prime real estate area. So that's another pressure. Tourism, as Thushan mentioned, is another big activity that's increasing along. There are a range of different interest groups who look at coastal and marine, who are in contesting for these spaces. So it's not a very static place. It's also highly dynamic. And over and above that, once you overlay climate change over it, it makes things a lot more difficult and complicated. So it's not an easy system by any stretch of it. Since we're talking about coastal and marine communities, the primary communities that settle on the coasts are, or historically have been living on the coastlines, are the fisher communities. They're I mean, especially in countries like India, fishing communities are also extremely diverse, from very subsistence-based fisheries, as you can see, on the lower left bottom, all the way to highly mechanized fishing as well, which is trawling, perceining, big boat operations as well. So there's a significant amount of livelihood dependence, a significant amount of relying on the coastal and marine space. It also has ecological and environmental and biodiversity value as well, right? So it is economic, ecological, social, multiple services that the coastlines offer. And as we all would have heard multiple times, they're also a first line of defense, coastal storms and all of that, right? Storm surges and all of that. And the coastal communities also use these spaces in multiple ways, using it for a range of their fishing and fisheries related activities. Again, Thushan also did mention about this, this is the space where they keep their boats, anchor their boats, dock their boats. This is the space where they live. And this is also the space that they use for a range of other activities. Like you can see fish being dried on the corner, right? And, nutritional kind of impacts as well. It's not just for, I mean, if you look at the contributions of fish and fish, the country's GDP, you only look at how much is exported and how much of value that export brings in terms of GDP. There are lots of hidden services as well, because it's this fish, especially the ones that are not exported, that forms the primary source of nutrition, easy, cheap, accessible nutrition for a range of, coastal poor communities as well. So it contributes significantly to nutritional security and thereby indirectly to, the country's development as well. Coming to the main topic here, which is climate change and its potential impacts on coastal and marine systems. A lot of you would already know a range of issues, so I'm not going into details of those, but I just listed some of these here. Sea level rise being the most prominent from the community's point of view, because it literally displaces them. So on the one side, there is increasing development pressure in terms of infrastructure, ports, coastal development, highways, all of those coming from the landward side towards the coast. And then there is the increasing sea level rise pushing, the fisher communities further and further up. So they kind of sandwich, the hinterland development and impacts of sea level rise and, other cyclones, storms and all. In a way, it makes them extremely vulnerable as a community to multiple effects of climate change, not just sea level rise, but also things like weather disruptions like cyclones and storms, the intensities and of which seem to be increasing, becoming extremely high in more recent decades. But there are a range of other things that also do have direct and indirect impacts for fisher communities. So a lot of them do depend on their inherent understanding of how the ocean works. This is not textbook-based learning, but very lived experiences. Their engagements on a day-to-day basis with with fisheries as a sector brings, they have these day-to-day observations, day-to-day learnings and wisdom they get from practicing fishing as a livelihood, a means for livelihood, right? So there's a lot of knowledge that they have, and they have very good understanding where to find fish, what times of the year, what are the different, when do they spawn? So a inherent understanding is there within communities, and they rely on this knowledge to go and, catch fish, secure their livelihoods, plan where to set up their settlements and all of that. And a lot of this inherent knowledge is also getting disrupted because climate change is changing the way how the oceans also behave. So say, for instance, sea surface temperatures and changing hydrodynamics of the ocean, changing wind patterns, all of these affect how communities perceive and understand oceans and their ability to, exert their rights to use the ocean, right? There are lots of loss of livelihoods, property, lives, humongous amount of, impacts going on every day as we speak. Those things are happening, playing itself out along the coastline, especially in pockets where it's significantly vulnerable. And these are all not out there in the limelight because historically coastal and marine systems have been neglected. So they're not there in the center of lots of news and attention and all of that. unless it's a, yeah. So there are a significant amount of, issues that coastal communities do face. Other thing is that, there are enough studies showing the potential impacts of what could happen if things continue as is. Say, for instance, 1 meter sea level rise, the prediction is about 7.1 million people in India. That's, the entire population of a few European countries put together, right? So that's the level of, impact that we are looking at. And this is just in terms of how many people will get displaced. And when you talk about displacement, there's also the other question of where will these people get displaced to? And these are also communities who have a certain kind of livelihood, a certain kind of cultural relationship, and all of that with oceans. It's not an easy challenge to kind of accommodate these 7.1 million people in other places as well. We're talking about massive migrations, ecological and social impacts. And also, just to give you an idea that it's not always sea level rise or climate change. It always becomes, quite often these words also become very flexibly used. Good umbrella to put things under, right? Because it's so intangible, you don't know what the impacts are. So anything that you see on the coast, it's easy to blame it on on climate change or on, issues of sea level rise, coastal erosion and all of that. But coastal erosion is a real significant problem along the coastlines in India, specifically where there is strong dynamics in the beach space. This is from Tamil Nadu, back in 2000, where we were doing a survey, and this is just north of Pondicherry, which is completely sea-walled coastline. They put granite walls over and over. It's a huge investment. As you can see in the bottom corner, you can see the seawall. But as soon as the seawall gets over on the northern part of it, it's completely eroding in very short time periods. You can see how much of it erodes. Some of this beach might come back. Effect is again towards erosion, and people do get displaced more and more. As you can see, small catamarans that people have been using, there's no more space to keep those catamarans here, right? So now where do these people work out of? So there are lots of such issues. And to add to all of it, coastal communities also, a lot of the fisher communities in particular have not land rights over the land on which they've been living over the years. So they're also very prone to displacement as a community. And the point I was trying to make here is that it's not always sea level rise that's led to this particular event of erosion. This is entirely because of bad coastal infrastructure development. So, Pondicherry has already been going through a lot of coastal erosion, roads, big buildings and all are all under, serious threats of eroding and getting taken away by the sea. So they have put seawalls. Now, what happens when you put seawalls is that entire wave energy is transferred further away into areas where there are no seawalls and has huge impacts on those areas. So unless you continue walling the entire coastline, you're not going to have a system where the coastal areas are going to be protected. And this has huge consequences. So the point is that it's also very poor coastal management that is leading to a lot of the issues that we see. But often it's convenient to blame it on climate change and sea level rise rather than trying to unpack things. And there are a range of other issues as well. While some of these other bigger issues like sea level rise, sea surface temperatures are all getting a lot of attention, there are lots of other inherent issues with this larger issue of climate change. One is that and something that I feel very strongly about is that it's not a conversation that's mainstreamed. It's still, for lack of other words, it's still a very urban elite privileged kind of a conversation. It's not a conversation. It's not that these conversations do not happen in fisher communities or people who live on the coast. Of course they do. It's a day-to-day thing. For them, it's like a lived experience on a day-to-day basis. But none of these, they're not part of any of the larger conversations of climate change. It's still things that conversations that are happening in circles like this, where, either it is of academic interest or it is of, a larger globally, like a big event. It's not a conversation that's trickled down, not a mainstream conversation that's trickled down to the grassroots. And this is, according to me, it's a huge missed opportunity. Like I said, we're talking about millions of people who could potentially be the, flag bearers of climate change in future because it has direct implications for them, but they do not have a space to participate in these conversations. So it is really critical to build those platforms where these conversations can be mainstream, taken to the community. And it's not that people are completely helpless. Thushan talked about resilience in fisher communities, and that's again something you see time and again happening very effectively in communities as well. So with climate change, what we are also seeing is that a lot of fish stocks have changed, like species that were normally found in warmer waters. Because the waters are getting warmer and warmer, these ranges or distribution of these species are changing. And what we are seeing is communities are also changing their practice according to the changes in resources. So they are actually adapting as we speak. But we don't see these adaptations. We are completely blind to these because it's not done in a way is acceptable to conventional science. So I think there's like a huge missed opportunity. And also given the number of people who potentially on this side of the fence, we're missing out on putting significant pressure on state governments or government in general as well. The other big thing is, like I said, the inability to disentangle climate change issues from very locally generated issues like the seawall issue and it's a very textbook approach to addressing the issue of climate change, right? You need science to counter to understand the problems of climate change, but its adaptation and mitigation are not necessarily within the purviews of how science is practiced currently. And I think there is a lot of effort to be put in there to make this an inclusive problem. Like I said, there are lots of things happening at the grassroots in terms of adaptation and change, to these problems, but none of that is getting incorporated into a larger plans of addressing. There's a huge incompatibility with the larger development aspirations, not just of the larger center, but also of the community's development aspirations as well. Because everyone wants a certain kind of lifestyle, certain kind of, development to happen. And quite often these are not compatible with environmental concerns or even with people's own livelihood concerns as well, right? And a lot of the reactions, again, seawall issue being a very good example, which is why I had included only that there. Quite often the reactions to these issues are very knee-jerk reactions without thinking of long-term consequences of the remedial measures that we take as well. They often add to the problem rather than again, when I was talking about, the map on the left is basically a prediction of, what will happen to a lot of the coastal areas, with sea level rise in 1 meter sea level rise. And you can see there are a large portion of our population, nearly half of India's population lives within 50 kilometers of the coastline. And that's a significant number. And a lot of them are, a lot of these communities are under serious threat of either displacement or having significant losses because of climate change related issues. But to add to all of it, like I mentioned about the incompatibility of development aspirations, is we as a nation are moving forward to addressing these issues, because if you look at the development is planned, I don't know if you all have heard of the Sagarmala project, but this is basically a large vision of the government to build these massive maritime-based, economic opportunities for the country. While that is welcome on one hand, it really does need the local community and their lives and livelihoods, but B, also these issues of climate change, issues of erosion, issues of increasing storms and all of that, and basically not planning according to what's happening along, because coastlines are dynamic. They're not static entities. They're not, every year they do change in relation to what happens. So yeah, where do we go from here? We do really need some clear commitment, cooperation and planning, because there are different agencies involved in deciding what we do. So like I showed the earlier image, it's the Ministry of Shipping who's the main nodal agency to mobilize a lot of the plans in terms of maritime development, especially port-based development. And then there's the Ministry of Fisheries, there's the Ministry of Environment and Forest, there's the Ministry of, there's also the industrial development interests and all of that. There's corporate, all kinds of interest groups who don't speak to each other. So at the end, it's like completely unplanned and, inappropriate kind of development vision that happens, which is not going to reduce these issues, in which climate change gets lowest priority. Environment and climate change gets the lowest priority in all these planning, right? So how do we make it more central? How do we get more commitment and integration of these concerns into all these various sectors and ministries? How do we mainstream this conversation about, currently most of the commitments that governments are, compelled to commit to is all coming from external, international agencies or, international pressure. There is barely any pressure being put on, or, there's barely any push coming from local to include these issues into a lot of the plan. Civil society like our government and community, in institutions, all of these need to work together to address these problems. This is not a scientist's problem or the science community's problem to resolve. It is a collective problem. These problems and their solutions need to be discussed, will be done in silos. And we do need to identify that, like I said, there are lots of existing strengths and abilities within us as a community, specifically with coastal and marine communities. How do we leverage a lot of these, right? And how do we get more accountability from both corporates as well as government entities? These are all some of the critical things that we need to consider. While there are very specific kind of issues and things that one can take up, a lot of the things that Thushan mentioned, but there are also these larger issues that one does need to take into factor. Otherwise, other things just end up as band-aids and not long-term kind of solutions as well. So on that note, I will wrap up this. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Naveen, for that informative talk and bringing to light various non-spoken but critical issues of the coastal communities. So if anyone have any questions to Dr. Naveen, please raise your hand or add in the chat box. So if no one has any questions, we can. So concluding this insightful session, it was a privilege to hear from both our speakers on the effects of climate change on the coastal systems in India and Sri Lanka, as well as on sharing various issues and other activities implemented by the NGO. So thank you, Dr. Naveen and Mr. Thushan, for joining us, and I hope we can take this forward with more collaborative works at Future Earth. I also take this opportunity to thank my colleagues at Future Earth South Asia and the Vecha Center for all their support, and thank you all participants for joining us. The Zoom recording will be uploaded in the YouTube channel of the Vecha Center very shortly. So thank you all once again.
Thanks, Jancy. Thanks for organizing this and having us here. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay.